Whether you've been dealing with headaches for a while or you're new to frequent attacks and you're looking to start an active headache recovery journey, this is where you should start, and all journeys should really start from this place. Active headache recovery isn't really about exercise to manage your headache condition. It's about taking an active role in improving and managing your headache or migraine disorder. The first place to start with an active process is with lifestyle change, performing the necessary review of the basics before looking for more advanced treatments. Because without a strong foundation of healthy lifestyles, the more complex treatments might not achieve their maximum values. There's also evidence that simply addressing these lifestyle areas can provide significant relief for many with migraine, especially if implemented before the condition becomes chronic. And I do want to be clear, I'm not saying these strategies are a cure for migraine. Migraine is a neurological disease that is very complex and still yet to be completely understood. These strategies are just meant to help you manage the condition. So there's a simple mnemonic to help this process, and it's called SEEDS, which stands for sleep, exercise, eating, diary, and stress. And while simple, they can be the key to headache prevention and management for a lot. So in this video, I'll briefly cover each area, and then in future videos, I'll take a more in-depth dive as part of a lifestyle series. Alright, so we'll first talk about sleep and why sleep is important. Common sleep disorders like insomnia and sleep apnea are very much associated with migraine, and in addressing those conditions medically can be helpful. So if you have those conditions or suspect that you might, please see your doctor so you can get treatment for those. We also know that we can improve sleep quality and help you get even just a little bit more sleep, that you might have fewer migraine attacks. And there are studies out there that have demonstrated the relationship between sleep and attack frequency. In fact, good sleep hygiene habits have been shown to change chronic migraine back into episodic migraine. So here are the basics for sleep hygiene to help you get started. 1. Keep the bedroom calm, dark, and cool. Number 2. Go to bed at the same time each night and wake up at the same time each day. The goal is to aim for 7 to 9 hours. Now this time for sleep will vary for each person. For example, my ideal sleep time is about 7 hours and 15 minutes to about 7.5 hours. And then number 3, avoid using phones, tablets, or the television in the bedroom and before bed, because it can make it more difficult to fall asleep. The blue light exposure can actually stimulate the brain and cause you to fall asleep less quickly. The overall goal of sleep hygiene habits is to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep for the right amount of time, and prevent sleep disturbances that might wake you up throughout the night to improve your overall quality. But I'll cover more about optimal sleep environment, sleep routines, and other strategies to help you sleep better in another video. So next is exercise, which many of you with migraine already know can be very challenging, and I'm sure for a lot of you, you can exercise, and I'm not really surprised. When looking generally at those with migraine, research for physical activity levels are low for those with migraine, so being sedentary is associated with more frequent attacks and more chronic disease. However, we don't really know if that's because people avoid activity due to pain, or is it because people are less active or actually having more headache? My guess is it's probably a little bit of both. But migraine attacks can be triggered by exercise, and exercise can worsen an attack that is ongoing. And while we know that exercise can be a trigger, it's not always going to be a trigger for every single exercise session. So I still strongly recommend exercise to everyone. And I'm not saying go out right now and run 30 minutes or go for a big walk every single day. I know a lot of people with migraine avoid that physical activity, especially if it becomes strenuous, because there's that potential for attack. But research is starting to show that when we're doing more physical activity at appropriate intensities, that the condition improves over time. The majority of studies have looked at really only aerobic exercise as a migraine preventative, and with that research, it's been as comparable in prevention as some first-line medications. Newer research is starting to shine the light more on strength or resistance training, and what I want people to know right now is if you're starting to exercise, you may be somebody that's struggling, and you may have had a head injury, and you may have low energy levels, and that's okay. What you want to start with is that no one's going to exercise at the same level. So if you're someone that's completely sedentary, just starting with 5 or 10 minutes once or twice a week can be very beneficial for you and to start, and that's perfectly okay to not really reach ideal levels right away. Once you feel like you can start doing more and you're very successful with that, gradually increase that intensity in time. So if you're doing 5 or 10 minutes, slowly increase to 15 to 20, right? And then add another day or two here and there. But be patient with yourself. Don't get distracted with not fitting the ideal levels or intensity of the exercise immediately. Jumping into levels that your body just isn't ready for is kind of like jumping into a hot tub. The better way to go in is slow and take your time and get acclimated to that temperature. The general recommendations for exercise, according to the American College of Sports Medicine, is 150 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise a week. So it'd be like brisk walking or cycling. If you're doing vigorous exercise, that's like intense aerobics like Zumba or a HIIT class or a spin class, then it's lower as 75 minutes per week. Recommendations for strength training is performed 2 to 3 days a week using multi-joint movements like push-ups or squats, doing one set of 8 to 12 reps. Now, this isn't the starting point for many people. This is the destination of an ideal fitness goal. So as a beginner with chronic pain, don't start seeking immediately to fit those times in. Accept where you are and create a plan to gradually increase over time. So I'll be making a more specific exercise video where I'll go in depth on ideal levels of exercise, how to start exercising if you're new to it, and guidelines to prevent attacks to really help you start that program. So the second thing is for eating, and I'm going to stick to 2 basics in this video as it's a very complex topic. There's a lot of things that we can dive into regarding diet and hydration and how it affects those with migraine, but I'll talk a little bit about this stuff today. In regards to eating, the number one thing we know is that fasting is a very big trigger for the majority of people with migraine. We know that the brain runs on sugar, a lot of sugar. The brain roughly consumes about 20% of the body's total energy each day. That's a lot of energy for such a little organ, right? It's very active. So in your body, the sugar is called glucose, and your brain depends on this energy. And unlike our muscles, our brains can't break down other energy sources like fat, so we rely on glucose. So since fasting needs to be avoided, be sure to replenish those energy stores early in the morning, right? You're sleeping 7 to 9 hours. That's a long time not to eat. So make sure you eat first. And then you want to be eating about every 3 to 4 hours after that. This is to maintain adequate energy levels for the brain and the rest of the body to prevent fatigue. Regarding hydration, I'm sure you've heard 8 glasses a day to help with water, but that's actually probably a low recommendation. The ideal recommendations for women actually for hydration are 2.7 liters a day, and for a man about 3.7 liters a day. 3.7 liters would be almost the equivalent to a gallon. So if you start increasing your water and you start going to the bathroom more, I'm sorry about that. In more eating, in another video, I'll talk more about eating. We'll go through migraine diets, food triggers, and other supplements that are recommended, and things that are supported by the research. I don't want to really talk about anecdotal evidence because there's a lot of misinformation out there about what works and what doesn't. So I'm going to just try to stick to things that are supported by migraine research. If you do think you have a dietary issue, like IBS, please see your doctor for those treatments, and then also work with a dietitian. They're experts in disease management. Okay, so moving on to the D in SEEDS. This stands for diary. This is an important place to gain control of your headache and migraine and know more about your disease. So everyone starting their journey should actually start with recording what's going on. And the primary reasons are, 1, this gives you a baseline of symptoms. It helps establish a more accurate diagnosis, especially when you start seeing your neurologist, so they can really work on creating a better plan of care. The second thing it helps with to identify possible triggers that you have. And the third thing it can help with is determining if treatments are helping to address your condition. So we can use this information from a diary to help identify patterns related to your condition, how effective different treatments are, if medication overuse is making your condition more chronic. There's a lot of apps for tracking. You could also use a calendar, a pen and paper journal. It's really about your preference. I know on the Association of Migraine Disorders website, they have a great printable version if you want to do the pen and paper method. You can also use a regular journal. There are plenty of headache tracker apps. Migraine Buddy is probably the most popular and common. Just be sure it's easier for you to use and you're going to use it. So if you're going to track manually, here's some things you want to write down. So the date that it occurs, about the time of day, medications used, and other symptoms like if you have dizziness, nausea, light or sound sensitivity. We also want to make sure that the method you're using is easy to stick to, because if you're not consistent with implementing the system and keeping an accurate record, it's not going to be as useful for you. And the last S in SEEDS is for stress. And no, I'm not talking about anxiety to cause migraine. We do need to discuss anxiety and its relationship to migraine, but that's a different talk for a different time. What I want to talk about today is what stress is. So there's more than one form of stress. When people hear that word, they really think immediately, oh, psychological stress, and that stress is inherently bad. But there are other forms of stress, like weather or the brightness of the sun, which are environmental stressors. But stress isn't always bad. Weddings are stressful, but they're joyful occasions. Exercise is a form of stress that builds muscles and strong bones. And those are good things. That's a good form of stress. So stress can be good or bad. The real key regarding stress is learning stress management. And this is important because you want to be able to identify the sources of stress, which stretches you can modify or control, how to reduce stress during heightened periods, and how to recover better from stressful events. So the first place I tend to start with all my clients when talking about stress management is actually time management. We want to have a clear schedule, times for work, times for rest breaks or naps, times for getting chores done, times for taking care of the kids or spending time with family, and a set bedtime, right? That goes back to a healthy sleep schedule. Having better time management and scheduling things accordingly can help in a lot of different forms of stress. We can lower our cognitive stresses by having specific times for work, for childcare, for chores. This also builds in time for rest in the day and recovery, or time to eat and reduce the stress from low energy or dehydration. Then we're addressing fatigue and restoring energy to our systems if those are triggers for you. And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to stress management. We haven't even crossed into how we can improve stress recovery during high periods. We can use things like meditation or biofeedback, but I'll dive into that in the in-depth stress video. So just remember, stress can be good or bad. How we manage stressors are important. Right? So sleep, exercise, eating, diary, stress. That's the lifestyle review, and it's the first step in the non-pharmacological management of migraine and headaches. The primary focus is to lay a foundation of a healthy lifestyle. For some people, can be all that's necessary for their condition to be more controlled. But for others, it's just a starting point to help manage their symptoms and improve the effectiveness of other medical treatments that they seek out. But really, the SEEDS and lifestyle review is where everybody should start to help improve their condition.